Picture this, you're earning more than your parents did at the same age, maybe even double what they made, yet somehow it feels like you're running in place. The paycheck hits, bills get paid, groceries are bought, and suddenly there's barely anything left to save. It's like no matter how hard you try to stretch your money, there's always another expense waiting around the corner. And if you've ever caught yourself asking, why do I feel broke when I make a decent salary? You're not alone. A lot of people will tell you it's because of bad spending habits. Too many lats, too many subscriptions, too many dinners out. And while sure, those things add up, that's not the real story here. Cutting out your $5 coffee isn't going to magically fix the fact that so many middle-class families in 2026 are living paycheck to paycheck. This isn't just about personal finance mistakes. This is about a system that's slowly tightening the squeeze on the middle class, making it harder than ever to balance a budget, even for people who are doing everything right. This is what I call the middle class budget crisis. It's not just inflation, it's not just rising housing prices, and it's not just student debt. It's a mix of hidden forces working together to make money feel like it's disappearing faster than you can earn it. Today, I want to break down the 6 biggest ones so you can finally understand why making a good salary doesn't guarantee financial breathing room anymore, and what you can actually do about it. Think about this for a second. Over the last few decades, middle-class wages have barely moved. Yes, the number on your paycheck today might look bigger than what your parents earned, but when you factor in inflation and the skyrocketing cost of living, the increase is almost meaningless. A recent study showed that since the 1980s, wages for the average worker have grown by less than 15% after inflation. Meanwhile, costs for housing, healthcare, childcare, education, food have exploded by double, sometimes triple that rate. So while it feels like you're making more money, in reality, you're losing purchasing power year after year. Housing is one of the clearest examples. In the 1990s, a typical middle-class family could expect to spend about 25% of their income on housing. Fast forward to 2026, and in many cities, that number is closer to 40-50%. It's doubled in some areas in just the past decade. A bedroom apartment that cost first under $200 a month in 2012 can now be $20,400 or more. Even people who bought homes early feel the squeeze. Since property taxes and maintenance have soared along with housing values, it's not just about affording the roof over your head anymore. It's about housing costs eating up a chunk of your paycheck that used to go to savings, travel, or even just a little breathing room. Healthcare tells a similar story. You'd think having insurance would mean peace of mind, but in reality, even with employer coverage, medical bills can crush a family budget. Premiums are higher, deductibles are steeper, and out-of-pocket costs for something as simple as an ER visit can run thousands of dollars. Families earning a middle-class income often find themselves delaying doctor visits or skipping prescriptions because they literally can't afford them. It's not about irresponsible spending here. It's about the essentials of staying alive costing more than the average paycheck can handle. Childcare is another silent killer for middle-class budgets. In many states, annual cost of putting one child in daycare is more than a year of tuition at a public college. Families with 2 working parents often find themselves spending a third of their combined income just to have someone watch their kids while they earn that income in the first place. For single parents, the equation is even more brutal. Choosing between career advancement and affordable childcare isn't a choice. It's a trap. Then there's education. College was once seen as the golden ticket into the middle class. Today, it's often a ticket into debt. The average student loan balance for graduates hovers around $30,000, but many carry far more. And while wages for degree holders have stayed relatively flat, tuition has grown by over 200% since the 1990s. Families are either going into massive debt to give their kids a chance or watching their children graduate into a workforce where their paycheck barely covers loan payments. The basics like food and utilities are far more expensive than most people realize. Grocery bills that used to be manageable now feel like luxury shopping trips. Eggs, milk, everyday staples have seen price jumps that eat away at what little discretionary income remains. When you combine that with energy bills, gas, services that are practically unavoidable, it becomes clear why paychecks vanish so quickly. The real issue here is that wages and costs have been moving in opposite directions. Wages are crawling while costs are sprinting. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up while your legs stay the same pace. No matter how much effort you put in, you end up falling behind. That's why so many people feel like the math just doesn't add up anymore, because it doesn't. Here's what most people don't realize when we hear that inflation is only 3% or 4%. That number doesn't tell the whole story. The official inflation index averages a massive basket of goods, which includes items most families don't buy often, like electronics, appliances, or luxury items that might even get cheaper over time. But the essentials that middle-class families depend on every single day, groceries, utilities, car insurance, have been rising much faster than that average. So while the numbers might look moderate on paper, the lived reality is very different. Think about shrinkflation at the grocery store. of chips that used to be 12 ounces is now 9 ounces, but the price tag hasn't changed. A carton of orange juice that used to be 64 ounces is quietly cut down to 52 ounces. Families are paying more for less without always noticing it right away. Multiply that across every aisle. Cereal boxes, yogurt cup, cleaning supplies, and suddenly the grocery bill feels heavier even if you're buying the exact same items you always have. It's not a luxury problem, it's the core essentials getting more expensive in sneaky ways. Utilities tell another part of the story. Energy costs have climbed as fuel prices fluctuate and infrastructure ages. Air conditioning in the summer, heating in the winter, internet service, water bills, these aren't optional expenses. Families can't simply decide to budget cut electricity the same way they might skip a restaurant meal. So when those bills creep upward year after year, there's no real choice but to pay them. Even if official inflation says 3%, families see their power bill jump 10% or more, and that difference quietly eats into their disposable income. Insurance, both health and auto, rises at a pace far faster than most wage increases. Car insurance premiums have jumped significantly in recent years due to higher repair costs, more expensive vehicles, and even increased accident rates. Healthcare premiums, as mentioned earlier, rarely stay flat, and with deductibles added in, families face hundreds or thousands of extra dollars just to stay covered. These increases don't show up in the same way as a flashy iPhone price drop, but they hit the middle class where it hurts. Now add lifestyle creep into the equation. Even when people earn more money, the rising cost of essentials forces them to spend more just to stand still. A raise might feel like progress, but instead of funding savings or investments, it often goes straight into covering the latest jump in rent, utilities, or groceries. What feels like an improved lifestyle is really just maintaining the old one at a higher cost. There's also a psychological layer to this. When you earn more, it's natural to want to enjoy a little more. Maybe you upgrade your car slightly, move into a bigger apartment, or treat yourself to nicer dinners. Extravagant luxuries. They're small adjustments that feel deserved after working hard. But when combined with the silent rise of essentials, these small upgrades can quickly eat up the extra income. To separate genuine lifestyle improvements from the forced spending increases of hidden inflation. This is why so many middle-class families describe the feeling of trading water. They get raises, bonuses, or even promotions, yet their savings accounts don't grow and their budgets still feel tight. From the outside, it looks like they should be thriving. But beneath the surface, every dollar is being stretched thinner by forces outside their control. Hidden inflation raises the floor of what it costs to survive, while lifestyle creep gently raises the ceiling of what people expect from themselves. Together, families in a cycle where income growth doesn't translate into financial stability. The frustrating part is that it's hard to point to a single expense and say, this is why I'm broke. Instead, combination of dozens of little increases, the extra $40 on the electric bill, the $100 jump in insurance premiums, the grocery bill that's $80 higher than last year. These don't feel like dramatic shifts. Added together, they quietly erode the breathing room that middle-class families used to rely on. That's why, even with more money coming in, the financial stress never seems to ease up. Here's the truth about how most middle-class families are getting by in 2026. Debt has quietly become part of the monthly budget, not as an emergency fallback, but as a permanent fixture. Credit cards, student loans, financing, even buy now, pay later services, these aren't just occasional tools anymore. They're baked into the way people afford everyday life. And while debt can provide short-term relief, it also siphons away disposable income in ways that make it nearly impossible to get ahead. Start with credit cards. The average American household carrying credit card debt now owes close to $7,000, and interest rates have climbed into the 20% range. That means families are paying hundreds of dollars every month not to reduce their balance, but just to cover interest. Think about how much money that really is. The equivalent of a family vacation, a solid emergency fund, or a down payment on a car, gone each year just to service debt. It becomes a hidden tax on being middle class, punishing families for needing to lean on credit when their wages fall short. Student loans are another long-term weight. Millions of people are entering middle age still carrying balances they thought would be gone by their late 20s. Even if payments are paused or adjusted, the interest keeps growing in the background. A graduate with $35,000 in loans who makes minimum payments often ends up paying $50,000 or more over time. That's money that could have gone toward retirement savings or homeownership. Instead, keeps the borrower chained to a system where their degree gave them access to the middle class, but the debt attached to it keeps them from fully living that lifestyle. Cars, once a straightforward purchase, turned into decade-long financial commitments. The average new car price has crossed $47,000, and lenders now stretch loans out to 72 or even 84 months to make the monthly payments affordable. On paper, 600 car payment might not look too bad, but multiply it by 2 vehicles for a family and suddenly first earn $200 a month is going to depreciating assets. Add in interest, insurance, and maintenance alone can eat up a quarter of a household's take home pay. Families can't easily opt out. Transportation is necessary for work, school, and life, but the financing system ensures they pay far more than the sticker price. Then there's buy now, pay later, the newer player in the debt landscape. Services like Afterpay or Klarna make it feel painless to split up a $200 purchase into 4 smaller payments. For cash-strapped households, it feels like flexibility. But when multiple purchases stack up, it becomes just another form of credit, with missed payments leading to fees or even dings on credit scores. It's marketed as harmless, but in reality, encourages people to commit future income before they've earned it, which is exactly what gets families trapped in debt cycles. The real danger isn't just the debt itself, but how it quietly drains disposable income. Every monthly payment made toward interest is money that can't be used for saving, investing, or even covering rising living costs. Debt creates a drag effect on household finances, slowing down progress no matter how hard people work. It also creates emotional stress because families never feel fully caught up. Even if they earn more, their obligations rise alongside them, leaving little sense of relief. What makes this cycle even more damaging is stagnant wages. If incomes were rising quickly, families could pay down balances faster or outgrow their debts over time. Instead, they're stuck in a holding pattern where debt payments are a fixed cost and salaries aren't keeping pace. It's like trying to bail water out of a leaking boat while the hole keeps getting bigger. The takeaway here is that debt isn't just a tool anymore. It's a trap when the math doesn't support it. Middle-class families often don't have the luxury of avoiding it, but once they're in, the system is designed to make it incredibly hard to escape. Every interest payment is proof that debt doesn't just cost you money today, it steals from your future as well. For years, the personal finance advice handed down to the middle class has been the same: cut back on little luxuries, avoid eating out, save 10% of your income, and eventually you'll build wealth. It sounds simple, and decades ago it might have worked. But in 2026, those old rules of money don't fit the reality of how families actually live and spend. The problem isn't Lats or Netflix. It's that fixed costs like rent, healthcare, childcare, food, and insurance now swallow the majority of household income before families even have a chance to decide what to do with the rest. Take a famous factor. Cutting a $5 coffee every day saves around $150 a month or $1,800 a year. That's not nothing, but compared to the $600 rent increase a family might face when their lease renews, or the $300 jump in annual car insurance premiums, the small savings are instantly erased by one unavoidable bill. Families can slash all the discretionary spending they want, but if the essentials keep rising at this pace, they'll never be able to budget their way into financial comfort. The old advice about saving 10% of your income also feels almost impossible now. In theory, making $70,000 should set aside $7,000 a year for savings or investments. But when rent takes a $25,000, healthcare another $10,000, childcare another $12,000, groceries and transportation another $15,000, what's left over isn't enough to reach those savings goals. The percentages were designed for a time when essential costs were lower and wages stretched further. Today, they simply don't add up. So what does work in 2026? The first shift is moving away from penny pinching and towards smarter budgeting frameworks that recognize reality. Instead of obsessing over every discretionary expense, families need to focus on the big picture versus oriented spending. One modern approach is to allocate income into categories like essentials, growth, and flexibility. Essentials cover the basics: housing, food, healthcare. Growth includes things that build future wealth, retirement contributions, investments, or even paying down high-interest debt. Flexibility is the small portion left for lifestyle choices. By reframing budgeting this way, families prioritize what actually moves them forward rather than feeling guilty about minor expenses. Automation is another tool that makes a difference today. When money is tight, it's tempting to wait until the end of the month to see what's left for savings. But in most cases, nothing's left. Automatic transfers to savings or retirement accounts on payday helps build consistency without relying on willpower. Even small amounts add up. Automation removes the emotional decision making that makes budgeting harder. It's about creating systems that work in the background rather than constantly trying to cut from the foreground. Another key piece is income diversification. The old advice assumed a single paycheck from a stable job was enough. That's no longer true. Side hustles, freelance work, investing in skills, even small passive income streams can make a meaningful difference. A few hundred extra dollars a month might not feel like much, but it can be the difference between sinking into debt and staying afloat. World where expenses rise faster than wages, growing the income side of the equation is often more powerful than trimming expenses endlessly. It's also worth pointing out that financial stability today requires flexibility. School budgets were rigid set percentages, fixed goals, and strict rules. But with inflation unpredictable and costs changing quickly, families need room to adjust. Maybe that means holding a slightly larger emergency fund, using a rolling budget that looks at 3-month averages instead of strict monthly limits. Adaptability is now as important as discipline. The truth is, lats and skipping dinners out won't solve the middle-class budget crisis. Those sacrifices might help around the edges, but they don't address the structural problem of rising fixed costs and stagnant wages. What families need are strategies that acknowledge the world they're living in now, not the one their parents lived in decades ago. Budgeting today isn't about extreme sacrifice, it's about building smarter systems, automating good habits, and finding ways to grow income so you're not constantly playing defense. One of the hardest truths about money in 2026 is that the system itself isn't neutral. Treat all income or all people the same way. The wealthy don't just get richer because they work harder or spend smarter. They get richer because the rules of the game are tilted in their favor. Tax breaks, investment opportunities, and government policies consistently reward those who already have money, while the middle class is left playing by outdated rules that don't create the same advantages. Start with taxes. Most middle-class families earn their income from wages or salaries, which are taxed at some of the highest rates. A teacher, nurse, or manager might see 22% to 24% of their paycheck go straight to federal taxes, counting state or local deductions. Meanwhile, wealthy individuals who earn most of their money through investments pay capital gains taxes, which are often 15% or even less. That means someone making $1 million from stock gains could pay a lower tax rate than a middle-class worker earning $70,000 at their job. The structure isn't built around fairness. It's built to reward money that comes from wealth rather than labor. Housing policies reveal a similar bias. For decades, the mortgage interest deduction was touted as a benefit for middle-class homeowners. In reality, disproportionately benefits wealthier families with larger mortgages and higher tax brackets. Renters, who make up a growing portion of the middle class, get no equivalent benefit. And in many areas, real estate investors can deduct expenses, depreciation, and even losses, while the average family struggles just to cover rising rent with no tax relief at all. Corporate loopholes further highlight the divide. Large companies and the wealthy individuals who own them can use deductions, offshore accounts, and complex accounting strategies to minimize their tax bills. A multinational corporation might generate billions in revenue but pay little to no taxes in certain years. Meanwhile, a small business owner or employee pays every cent that's owed. These advantages don't just reduce taxes for the wealthy, they also free up more of their income to reinvest, creating a compounding effect that widens the gap. Investment opportunities also favor those with wealth. Accredited investor rules, for example, limit certain lucrative investments like hedge funds, private equity, and early-stage startups to people who already meet high income or net worth thresholds. That means the wealthiest investors have access to vehicles that can multiply their money far faster than traditional stocks or savings accounts. The middle class is left with 401ks and mutual funds, which can grow wealth slowly but rarely create the kind of exponential returns the wealthy enjoy. Even retirement accounts highlight inequality. While tax-deferred accounts like 401ks and IRAs are useful, their benefits scale with income. Someone who earns $200,000 can max out contributions and shelter a large chunk of income from taxes. Someone earning $50,000 often doesn't have enough left over to contribute much at all. They miss out on both the tax break and the compound growth. The result is a system where the people who can afford to save the most get the biggest rewards. Government policies also tend to respond to crises in ways that disproportionately benefit the wealthy. During market downturns or recessions, stimulus measures often pump money into financial markets to stabilize them. That helps protect the investments of the wealthy far more than the wages of everyday workers. The pandemic was a clear example. While relief checks provided temporary help for families, the massive stock market rebound created billions in new wealth for those already heavily invested. The gap widened as headlines celebrated a recovery. What this all adds up to is a system where the middle class is playing by one set of rules while the wealthy are playing by another. The middle class is told to budget carefully, save diligently, and avoid debt, while the wealthy are leveraging tax strategies, using debt as a tool, and multiplying wealth through investments that most people can't access. It's not that the middle class is doing something wrong, it's that they're following advice that was never designed to compete in the modern financial landscape. The takeaway is simple but uncomfortable. The middle class learns to adopt new strategies and increase financial literacy, they'll keep losing ground. Understanding how taxes, investments, and policy work isn't just for the ultra-rich anymore. It's a survival skill, because if the system rewards those who play differently, the only way forward is to stop playing by outdated rules and start adapting to the ones that actually build wealth today. If nothing changes, the picture of the middle class in the next decade looks very different from the one we grew up believing in. The promise of stability, home ownership, and upward mobility is already slipping. Wages continue to stagnate while costs keep climbing. The middle class won't just struggle, it will split. On one side will be those who adapt, finding new ways to build resilience through investing. multiple income streams, and smarter financial strategies. On the other side will be those who keep playing by the old rules, falling deeper into debt, stress, and insecurity. Imagine a family earning $80,000 a year in 2030. If rent, childcare, healthcare, and groceries keep rising at current rates, nearly 70% of their income will be locked into fixed costs before they even touch savings or lifestyle spending. Add in student loans, car payments, and credit card debt, and there's little left to invest in their future. These families will constantly feel one unexpected bill away from financial disaster. The stress of living like that doesn't just affect their wallets, it affects their health, their relationships, and even their children's opportunities. Over time, it creates a cycle where financial strain becomes a permanent state of being. Meanwhile, those who adapt won't necessarily be wealthier on paper, but they'll approach money differently. Instead of relying on one paycheck, they'll diversify income through side hustles, freelancing, or small businesses. They'll invest early even in small amounts, letting compound growth work in their favor over decades. They'll understand that debt can either be a trap or a tool. They'll use it strategically, borrowing to buy assets that grow, not just to cover expenses. These people won't escape the rising costs entirely, but they'll create buffers that protect them when the system squeezes harder. The danger is that the gap between these two groups widens over time. A shrinking middle class means fewer families feel stable, more slip into long-term financial stress. That's not just a personal issue, it reshapes society. When fewer people can afford homes, retirement, or higher education, the very idea of the middle class starts to erode. Becomes harder to distinguish from the working class while the wealthy continue to pull further away. Project that forward another generation and the consequences are clear. Children growing up in financially stressed households inherit not just fewer assets, but fewer opportunities. Parents too burdened by debt can't contribute to college costs or help with a down payment. Retirement becomes less about enjoying life and more about working as long as physically possible. The dream of doing better than your parents stops being the norm and starts being the exception. And yet, there is a hopeful side, because while the system may not change quickly, and history shows it rarely does in favor of the middle class, individuals still have power to adapt. Every family that learns to budget differently, smarter, and diversify income creates its own safety net against these pressures. The tools exist today in ways they didn't a generation ago: online education for new skills, digital platforms for side hustles, easy to access investing apps that allow even small contributions to grow. These are the strategies that will define who stays afloat and who falls behind. The choice isn't between wealth and poverty, but between staying stuck in an old model that no longer works or embracing new strategies that match today's reality. If nothing changes on the structural level, then the responsibility falls on individuals to adapt. It may feel unfair, but it's also empowering, because while you can't control tax policy or inflation, you can control how you respond. The warning is cleared. The middle class as we know it is at risk of shrinking into history if people don't adapt. But the call to action is equally clear: by learning, adjusting, and taking control of what you can. Put yourself on the side of the middle class that survives and even thrives in 2026 and beyond. The system won't change for you, so the only real option is to change how you play the system.